Welcome to Slight Reliability, learning SRE one day at a time. I'm Stephen Townsend. Welcome back to Slight Reliability. I'm Stephen Townsend, and this is the show where we learn everything about site reliability engineering together. Last week was a pretty busy week. It was the week that SLOconf, the conference, was on, as well as OlliFest on at exactly the same time. One conference about service level objectives, and one conference all about observability. Ollie is observability. I didn't know that until I was part of the conference. So, in this episode, I wanted to share my key takeaways or things that I picked out from SLOconf. Now, SLOconf was huge. There were 57 talks, usually 5 to 10 minutes long. Some were a little longer. I only got around to watching about 6 talks, which is pathetic, but there's only so many hours in the day. So the talks that I saw were Introducing Tracing-Based SLOs by Shelby Spees, Event-Based SLOs at Scale by Liz Fong-Jones, SLOs for the New Dog Owner by Isabel Riddlemeyer, SLOs in the Wild by Rob Jane. And the other one I've got here, I think, was from OlliFest, so I won't mention that one actually. So, those are the talks I saw. Rather than going through each talk and what I picked out of it, I thought I would summarize what I picked out from the individual talks and the discussion that happened in the Slack channels relating to SLOconf. So here we go. The first thing that was abundantly clear is that the terms service level objective and service level indicator mean different things to different people. That I watched talks where they were used in different contexts and didn't mean the same thing. There is absolutely confusion about what these things are exactly, and there are subtle differences which completely change what they mean. And anecdotally, even in the Google SRE book versus the Google workbook for SRE, there is a different definition. So once again, I think it's important to focus on the outcome that you're after rather than a specific terminology or a specific process. And we'll talk a little bit more about what I think the differentiator or the outcome is from SLOs in one of my other points. The second point I wanted to make is that, and this is going to sound terrible, but the more I watched SLOconf, the less convinced I became that SLOs are a good method for improving reliability in an organization, especially historically non-tech organizations who have structures and cultures which aren't necessarily conducive to SRE succeeding. It's a bold statement to make. It's just my opinion, of course, and I'm sure that it will change over time. So I asked the question in the Slack channel, what is, you're talking about SLOs, what's the purpose of them, what are they, how is it different than, say, having good observability? What will SLOs give you that really good observability won't already give you? And the basic answer is that when you do SLOs, you make a decision about what good looks like. So I think that is the differentiator. That's the thing that SLOs do that nothing else really in the world of SRE and monitoring and observability, performance engineering, any of that stuff does. So that's the differentiator, right? But I don't think that going in to a historically non-tech organization full of cultural and structural issues and saying we're going to define SLOs is the right way to get good outcomes. I think by far, and this is my current line of thinking and investigation, is that in that particular situation, a better opening move, if you're playing chess, which I don't play, would be to jump in and benchmark the current reliability around and how effective your operations is going. And then use the findings from that investigation to start a conversation. And part of the follow-up activities might be that you define SLOs for important services. But opening with, hey, SLOs is the answer, I completely disagree with. In essence, I think that defining good is great, but first you need to measure now. If you don't know the current state of things, how can you improve? And how can you measure your improvement? My next point is that defining good isn't easy. The language and knowledge difference between business representatives, customers, and engineers is huge, especially if they're not working together in a cross-disciplinary end-to-end feature team, which is what we want, right? And I think as engineers, we tend to go straight to the fact that, non-technical people, they just don't get it, the technical jargon. But from my experience, equally or even more so, engineers often don't understand how the business actually works, or what actually matters to the business, or how the customers actually experience the services that you provide. I had an interesting conversation with someone in the Slack channel around how do you define service level objectives with a customer focus when you have external customers who are just out in the world and you can't necessarily talk to them. You could do customer interviews, but what do you do in that situation? And I don't have the answer yet, but apparently there's a book called the SLO book, I think, something like that, and it has some ideas about how to tackle that. It was just food for thought. I think that there are potentially prerequisites before SLOs can be implemented effectively. I don't think there's a hard and fast rules like you must do this. I don't think it's like that. But there are things which are going to make it much easier to stick or to be effective with it. Cultural factors and structural factors, factors around how your teams are funded, for example, could also greatly hinder or greatly help your ability to set up meaningful SLOs and actually use them to drive better customer outcomes. Another thing I noticed is that open telemetry is everywhere. I was blown away that easily more than half of all the talks at OliFest were about open telemetry, and half the other ones mentioned it at some point. But the funny thing was, I kept hearing about open telemetry at SLOconf as well. And I've decided I can't ignore this anymore. Our team is planning to do a proof of concept of open telemetry as part of an upcoming hackathon at IAG, where I work. And I guess the last point is a little bit cynical / cheeky, is that there were a lot of speakers at SLOconf who came from tool vendors and from service vendors. And sometimes, to me anyway, it seems that there is a disconnect with the real world. There is a utopia presented. Here are the answers, and you can apply these things in the world, but they only really seem to work, in my mind, in very simple context when there are very few barriers. All that messy cultural and structural stuff gets in the way, and we don't want to talk about that. I want to see more honesty. For example, how an organization, maybe a traditional organization, maybe a government department, tried to apply the ideas which are created at some cutting-edge tech giant and how it just didn't work in their unique context. I want to hear more about that and the structural and cultural things which get in the way to succeeding in SRE and SLO and observability and all the stuff that I'm interested in, that I work in. I guess I'm quite interested in the creative ways that people have solved problems and improved outcomes in really messy organizations. I mean, that's my selfish desire because I work in a really big, complex organization, and I find it exciting solving those kinds of problems. So that's my take from SLOconf. I'm going to hopefully watch some more talks over the coming weeks if I can find the time. If you haven't seen any of the talks from SLOconf and you would like to, there is literally just a YouTube playlist with all 57 talks available to watch. And if you missed out on OliFest, you can still sign up and go back and watch the talks. I do believe they may be shared on YouTube in the future as well. All right, that's all from this episode. Looking forward to getting back to a little bit of the regular kind of content next week and seeing where that takes us. All right. See you next time.